Hey everybody, this is James P. Wagner here with Local Gems Press. I'm here with Nick Hale. Hey Nick.
Hey, James.
And this is the Publisher's Speakeasy, the behind the scenes little secret area where we answer questions that, well, we get asked quite a lot, both when we're on tour and doing our seminars, and sometimes people just email them to us. So, we decided let's make videos about them so that we can just refer people to videos and we don't have to keep answering them. But
Yeah, we probably will.
yeah, we do anyway, but that's okay. But yeah, so this question that we have right here is something that's come up a lot in actually a lot of our recent publishing seminars, and also people have asked it on the road, and that's it's pretty general. But can you discuss the role and place of literary agents in 21st century publishing? Which I think is a good question because I remember when I was going through grad school and my creative writing classes and all that stuff, there was like a lot of, well, I mean, there was generally just a lot of confusion about publishing in general, especially because that was like right smack in the middle of the age when like a lot of the traditional models were sort of changing and stuff. But, you've heard a lot of big name authors talking about their literary agents and things like that. And so people kind of wonder like, well, what's the deal with them? Are they necessary? Are they worth it? And how does it work? I mean, the general thing about a literary agent is usually they're representing what it is that you're writing, typically full length books. In some cases, it's like, smaller works, but generally it's for full length books because usually they're representing it kind of like any agency would represent you for pretty much anything. Usually they have a lot of clients they're working with and they're doing it because they're getting a cut of the revenue essentially. So, anywhere from 10, 15, 20%, whatever industry standard might be. And, the benefit of working with them though is they go in there with the publishers and they would, basically represent your work in a way to make it look really good and also be the possible into places that they kind of have ends with already. Whereas, you by yourself, you might not. Obviously, this lends itself more to certain genres than others because, like the concept of a poetry agent, for example, which sadly is probably most of our audience here. But I mean, 15% of a $10 token payment for a magazine is not, I can't imagine too many people are going to eat very well off of that. So that's why you don't see agents a lot when it comes to things like that. But with fiction and nonfiction, they're still pretty relevant out there. But even in those cases, people kind of have the idea of like, is it necessarily worth it to have an agent? And there's a lot of cases where it might be, and a lot of cases where it might not be.
Yeah, well, you kind of mentioned or hinted at least it's a way to sort of get an in with publishers and poetry. To go back to talking about poetry agents for a second is much more of a tight knit community. A lot of times you don't need anybody to get you an in with a publisher in poetry. You just kind of get involved in a community and get to know the publishers that way. It's not like you have a double day of poetry. Well, you do, but most poetry gets published through small press, through independent press, and university press. And in all those cases, it's a lot easier to get an in with the publisher than it would be if you're talking about writing, science fiction novels or something.
Well, maybe
Where,
maybe not with university presses and some of the presses, but in those cases, they're not going to consider slush pile work or even even
right,
agent in general. Usually, it's from within. So
yeah, it's coming from a recommendation. So even in the university press case, though, it's about having relationships with non-agent people that you're not paying, right? Like professors or um, people who have published previously at that press, or I guess donors. So maybe some people you're paying.
yeah, but in terms of are there active? I mean, who knows? There might be some agents out there who maybe they are, maybe they represent poetry in addition to other things. In some cases, I would probably is probably more the way of it. But in terms of like, oh, I'm a literary agent, I only represent poetry. I mean, unless they're from like a Zen monastery and they've taken a vow of poverty, I don't think that's probably their thing.
It's an
But also
untapped market.
yeah, but I mean, at the same time, though, in other genres, you get a lot more cases where like there's a lot more publishers who they don't have a slush pile. Like I mean, you get that in poetry as well, but it's more common with like fiction publications, for example, where it's like they deal with so many authors and so many publications that they don't take anything that's an unsolicited manuscript, so to speak. Like a lot of the bigger ones like TOR, with like fantasy science fiction, things like that. It's like they won't take a look at a manuscript that isn't represented by an agent, just because they kind of want to have it vetted and all that in those cases. So if you have something like that and you're looking for a publisher of that caliber and that distribution, getting an agent to represent it can definitely be a good thing. But then, of course, you have to sell to the agent why it is that they should represent you. And that almost becomes a whole submission. Well, that really is a whole submission process in itself, in addition to the other submission process, which is sending it to the publishers directly. I mean, the good thing is, though, if you have an agent, then the second submission process of your book going to publishers is going to be much shorter for you, because then the agent will kind of take over that work and doing that case. But you basically have to go through a whole different level of sort of selling what it is you do and why they want to represent you. And it's very rare that agents will really consider first time books or authors who don't have at least a little bit of a reputation or a renown in what it is that they're actually doing. I mean, it has been known to happen, but it is rarer. Usually you have cases where an author kind of builds up what they're doing for a bunch of years, and gets some stuff published, maybe even has several books already out there, and then they start approaching an agent to kind of take it to the next level. It's very rare to just kind of like out of the gate suddenly, oh, let me get like a top literary agent who's gonna represent me to all the big publishers, and then they're gonna like banks compete to give you a better loan, the publishers compete to get better advance and all that. Very rare that happens out of the gate.
It's kind of like breaking into the job market, right? It's that same deal. Like people are going to want evidence that you know what you're doing and that you're worth their time before they'll actually give you their time.
Yeah. And especially because, the way the agents make their money is literally off of a percent of whatever it is that you're making for the work. Obviously, they got to feel it's worth their time, or they, oh, this book that you have matches really, really well with a publisher that I already know. They already trust me, and this is something they're specifically looking for. So, in some cases like that, with the matchmaking works out really well. It could be like that. But, again, they're usually representing a whole bunch of different clients. And, like again, there are definitely situations where seeking out an agent can be to your benefit. They still have a place in the world in the 21st century, even though a lot of more of them may have existed 15, 20 years ago, but there's still plenty of them out there who are doing what they're doing. But it's not something that I think most authors, when they're starting out, really need to concern themselves with too much. That's more at least at the intermediary level and the advanced level. If we were going to say like this is a chess lesson, what level is this? I'd say literary agents is definitely intermediary and above, maybe even advanced and above. So yeah, I'd say once you're at the point that you've got a decent following, a decent amount of stuff published or whatever, if you happen to be in a genre where like an agent could kind of open some doors for you to maybe different possibilities, different publishers, things like that, or negotiate a better deal for you, might be something to consider. But every situation is going to be different, because you have to think about, okay, if I'm gonna sell a book to this publisher through an agent and they're going to give me an advance, and it's going to be this much money, then 15% or 20% of that goes right to the agent, and then you also don't know what the back end royalty deal will be on that too. Usually it's roughly the same thing, maybe it's a little bit less. Not that a lot of books that are fortunate enough to get an advance, though, 90% of them or more don't ever actually outlive their advance. So if you get to the point that you're actually getting royalties from the book, that's a good enough thing in itself. Because there's a lot of, because we always hear about the unicorn stories and like the J.K. Rowlings and the Stephen Kings and all that. So, in any genre, like most people have a vast overestimation of what best-selling book really is. In that case, they hear about like, really the top 0.0001% of bestsellers, because there are tons of novelists out there, for example, who, they write maybe one or two books a year, and they have an in with a publisher or two. They send it there, they get an advance that's usually x number of thousands of dollars or whatever. Sometimes because they're decently well known, maybe they'll out sell the advance or whatever, get money coming in that way, and because they have a catalog build up, they get some back end royalties and things like that. But these are authors who, like, you might see them on bookshelves, or maybe you go to the library, you'll see a bunch of them there, but they're not people that they don't have like the star-studded power that like a lot of other ones do. But those are really kind of like the grinding writers writers, and those are the ones who are like, this is like a career for them. It's not, I mean, it's a passion too, but it is a career, and they're grinding out the books and all that. And so, for somebody like that, getting an agent to take it to the next level might be a really good thing. But it all depends on the individual situation.
Yeah, and I think also it's worth remembering both when looking for a publisher and when looking for an agent that they deal with many clients, many authors, and so approaching it from the expectation that what you're showing them is not new or rare or special helps a lot, because I feel like a lot of them probably are dealing with a lot of people who are coming to them with ego forward. Oh, this is the best thing. Even if it's the best thing you've ever written or the best thing you've ever read, they've probably seen a whole lot of other stuff that's similar, because they're dealing with so many manuscripts and so many authors every day. So keeping that in mind would help. And yeah, I agree. We hear a lot about J.K. Rowling and a lot of those other authors who were overnight sensations, and that how much of a small amount of the authors they make up. And we also hear a lot, and thanks to Hollywood, and this isn't everything, those instant success stories where the guy down on your luck, you're sitting in a cafe,
Yeah.
you see somebody who drove up in a Porsche, and you walk up to them and say, I want that car. How about I quit my job right now and come work for you? And that actually works. And for the one time that it actually works, there's like 1,000 times where people have taken a shot like that and it didn't work.
I wonder what movie you're talking about there.
Yeah, I was gonna just mention it straight out, but
Yeah.
that scene is a great example of the mindset that it sometimes leads people to make the wrong approach when going after both agents and publishers themselves.
Yeah.
Um, and so just sort of be
Wolf
mindful.
of Wall Street, for those out there. He was talking about that scene where Jonah Hill goes up to Leo DiCaprio and is like, "You show me a pay stub of $72,000. I quit my job right now and I work for you." That whole bit. But at least that was like the stock market, so there was actually money to distribute.
Right. I mean, it's still very presumptuous. It's like, well, what
Yeah,
makes you think I want you to work for me?
yeah, exactly. Um, the funny thing is, they're actually, because the writers market, I'm not sure if they do it every year, but at least at one point they actually did have a guide to literary agents also. And it's funny because you were talking about like the wrong foot forward type of deal, because there was actually a whole section in the front that talked about, example of good cover letters and example of bad cover letters. And the good cover letters, obviously they showed like, hey, like I've noticed you represented this author, this one's in my writing group, you represent him, you've helped him, sell these books or whatever, and I write stuff that's kind of adjacent to that or whatever, so it might be a good fit for publishers, like just talking about that, like kind of like where you're talking about like, why they'd be a good fit for you. And then example of a bad cover letter, and it's like, hey, I've got an opportunity for you today like you've never seen before. I'm going to let you in on the latest sci-fi novel story, whatever thing, and ever. It's like, and they're like, what first of all, it's like sci-fi story, novelette. It's like, what is it? Like, first of all. Second of all, like, yeah, that's just not the way to lead with those things, like, at
It's
all.
also incredibly vague.
Yeah.
And a big part of it, and I guess that kind of smashes what I was going to say next, because a big part of it is approaching it from the angle of what can I do for you?
Mm-hmm.
How is this going to benefit you? It's just like going into a job interview. When they ask you the question, why do you want this job? You usually don't say because I
Money.
want a paycheck.
Yeah, because I want money. Yeah, no.
Right. It's like, so it's that same deal. It's like, why should I pick you? Well, this is why you would want to pick my book over somebody else's. But you want to be specific and you want to be realistic about it. It's like, why, what makes your book special or what makes you special as an author. Not vague. Oh, this is the greatest novel slash short story slash novella I've ever written.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, there's like that would be one of the arguments though of getting an agent, is that then if you manage to impress them, then you have somebody else who's saying all those good things about you to to publishers out there, which is kind of like what a lot of the big name publishers really want, because they want, anybody can kind of toot their own horn, and plenty of people do. But if an agent has signed on to actually represent the book, that means that, okay, they feel, they have some faith in it, they feel it has some brass tacks, and that's why they're bringing it to them.
Yeah.
But then you got to impress the agent first, to do that, and that, being professional in those regards actually would be helpful. Although I did read one story about an author who went to a literature conference and saw an agent at a booth or whatever, and brought it was like some housewife, I forget what it was she was writing, but she dropped off a manuscript and a plate of cookies on top of the manuscript to the agent, with like a little note about like, hopefully you'll read this or whatever. And then the agent like wrote back to her. She was like, the cookies were delicious. The manuscript needs work. Uh, but then she actually like bullet pointed her like all the things of like what you need to do or whatever. And then like I think about 2 or 3 years later, that agent actually signed on with that housewife because I guess the plate of cookies was like at least like, well, I guess since you gave me delicious cookies, I at least owe you some advice or whatever. And so, but she actually took the advice, and then they were able to work something out much later. So um so sometimes little things like that maybe can at least crack the door open a little bit, but it's not going to do it by itself. You got to
Well,
do. Yeah.
yeah, but you hit on what the important part there is, that she took that advice and she
Yeah.
went back and she reworked the thing based on the advice. And so that's a big part of it, is being able to take criticism once you've got your foot in the door, because sometimes if the door's open a crack, taking that criticism is the difference between pushing it open the rest of the way and having it shut on your fingers.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely a very
Definitely.
important part.
Yeah. And again, this applies a lot more to either fiction or nonfiction than it really does with poetry, because again, with poetry, in fact, maybe we should create a challenge of somebody to find a poetry agent out there at some point. Though I don't know that I would want to give any dollars for that, because it's more just a curiosity. Um, but yeah, I mean, in a nonfiction in particular, agented stuff can definitely be good, especially if you're representing, a field where like extensive knowledge in the nonfiction is required. There's more steps, that would be taken with that. But um, and in this day and age too, because things constantly change, the old model, used to be like they take a percent, kind of like with lawyers with your cases, they don't get paid until you get paid. There might be some models out there today where it's like, I'll be a literary agent representing you, but you got to pay me up front. I don't know that I would necessarily go with that unless you happen to find one who is they have a proven track record of getting results, or maybe people they've gotten results for, because I'd imagine that'd be a pretty nice way to get paid for doing very little for some people out there. But
Yeah,
um, but
I would
go ahead.
I'd be very wary of paying anything up front, with
Yeah.
the one exception being if you're not in this for the money at all. Like, not just that you're not in it for the money, but you don't care about money. Like, if you just want to see the thing go out and you're just happy to pay to have someone publish it, that's different. But if money is any kind of object, I would avoid paying up front just for an agent.
Yeah, because usually like the model is usually, again, they get paid when you get paid, generally speaking. But again, maybe there's some successful ones out there that maybe they charge a retainer up front, but they really get results. And if that's the case, because while there are lawyers who do the whole we only get paid if we win the case, there are plenty who charge up front, uh, who are very credible and get a lot of results. So it's possible, but I definitely, if they're asking for money up front, definitely be at least wary at the very
Yeah.
least with anything like that.
I mean, those lawyers are usually charging deep pockets, so that's part of it too. I mean, if you've got deep pockets and you just want to get your book published, no matter what the costs, that's a different story.
Yeah. And in fact, if you're kind of in that situation, though, you'll probably be ahead of the game in a lot of cases, because you'll be able to put money into advertising and all kinds of things that other people wouldn't be. But yeah. So to just kind of go over the bullet points here, literary agents are, they definitely can be worth it in the right situation. In some cases, not something to be concerned with just yet. Like if you're just trying to get your first book out there in whatever genre, probably not worth it to throw focus at an agent, because there's a lot of other things to be focused on first. If you are at a point that you're at least intermediately established, or even at the advanced level, could be something to look into. They do still exist in this day and age. There are situations where they can negotiate better deals for you, open doors for you. But still, for most writers, they're not necessary, and there's plenty of authors who have made it big by any stretch of the definition who didn't have agents at all. So um, those would be the bullet points I would cover. I don't know if you have any follow-ups on the conclusion.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the one big perk of having an agent is, we talk a lot about publishing is matchmaking.
Mhm.
Finding a matchmaker for you is a lot easier than making the match yourself, doing all that research yourself.
Yeah,
and
yes.
so it will
Agents are
augment the
Yenta.
process.
Agents are literary agents are Yenta for the publishing, like with Sin Roof, that's exactly what they
Yes.
are essentially. So, but you could also marry for love, not with your writing. Now, still good to matchmake, even if you're your own matchmaker. But yeah. So hopefully we answered that question. Thank you all for those listening. Thank you, Nick, for doing this one with me.
Yep.
We have 90 free poetry prompts are in the description if you are interested. If anybody's interested in publishing coaching, we have links to that as well. Take care, and we will see you on the next one. Publisher speak easy, but shh, don't tell anybody.